What's up gamers, welcome back to the channel. We're going to take a look at my builds and I'm going to show you things that you can learn from them with Morph's Bloxburg tips. Morph's Bloxburg's, but tried to say that 10 times fast. So yeah, I'm gonna go over some things in this video that may be helpful to you guys if you're trying to learn how to build and decorate and stuff like that. These are just things that I do. Other people might do it differently, I don't know. But let me open up a plot maybe. I guess since we're outside we could start with landscaping. So my one advice with landscaping with trees and stuff is not to be afraid to clutter them, because sometimes spaced out trees with like little in between can look bland and like less detailed. Use multiple types of trees in different colors and sizes. The same amount of trees not spaced out but like more cluttered in corners or clusters looks better and less busy, like this. You see what I mean? Okay, so say for example you're like building and you want to put trees everywhere. You see the difference? There is a huge difference in this and like cluttering things. See what I mean? Clutter is good. Clutter is not bad. Oh, I guess you can do outside for this one as well, which is feature walls, never touch. So on the outside, technically the feature wall would be the linen wood panels here, and it's only on certain parts of the house, not the whole house. So it's kind of like, and these ones are, I don't know, basic walls, I guess. So the ones sticking out are different and they're feature walls. And sometimes, like on the outside, you can connect them with a wall trim that is the same texture. At least that's what I do. When you come inside, you can see that the wood is feature wall on the inside as well. But feature walls never touch, because that is, I don't know, that's a big no-no to me. It looks way too busy if you have a feature wall like this and it's touching. Or if you have like one color, you don't want it to touch another feature wall. Like these. If these two were next to each other, it would be bad. But because it has this in the middle, they're not touching, so they look better. This is kind of like feature wall, but this is more like an accent corner-ish. So it's like, obviously it's two walls, but you know, it's a very small space. So in a small area, it could be okay. Like this. These two walls are touching, but it works. When you're building, this is for modern houses mostly, but when you're building a modern house, instead of just a flat wall with windows like this kind of, you can try adding depth to it with flat roofs or floors or half walls and fences. And then over here it's the same roof, and then behind it you have kind of a taller roof and it's a different color. And over here you have these half walls. I use half walls over here to add some more depth, but also because I don't want the roof to clip in. You can also add depth to landscaping with roofs, which is really simple. They don't have to be a certain shape. You could just go all crazy with them. But you see there's more depth here. You got the tall roof, but in front of it it's the smaller thin one to add more depth. This one kind of wraps around as like a feature roof. I don't know what to call this little thing. Before you start your build, I recommend going like at least 15 or 20 spaces back from the front of the plot, because this will save you from having to restart your build if you build it too close to the front of the plot. It also helps mark the middle of the plot if you want to do that as well. I do that generally because I want a lot of space in front of the house for landscaping and also for taking photos and stuff. So always count maybe like 15 to 20, maybe 25 squares back before you start building. We're getting into the next tip on the blank plot, which is going to be what textures to use for detailing and stuff like that. So for one, you don't want two busy textures next to each other. So if you're using like a really busy maybe bricks or like wood. Maybe. Generally, don't use those next to each other because it can look really messy and yeah, it just doesn't work. You can use them in the same area, but not next to each other. So if you're using this, then you want to use something more solid next to it, like, you know, foil, metal, much softer texture next to it, similarly to how you do walls. So if you have a wall that's kind of like this one is going to be the busy texture because it's smaller. You don't want the busy texture to take up the big space, because unless you want that to be the focus space. But if you don't want that to be the space you focus on, swap them. The smaller spaces should be busy, so there's less of it and it's not as overwhelming. This is all in my personal experience, by the way. Your opinions might be different. This is just my advice. I don't even know if that was helpful. I'm trying to be helpful, but I don't know. This is why I don't make a lot of helpful like tips videos, because I don't know what to say. Like, I kind of just go with the flow. Another question I get a lot is how to fill empty spaces. I will sometimes build like you can put a bookshelf there. You can put any kind of storage in an empty space. That's kind of what you do in real life, right? You just fill an empty space with storage or another sofa or something, but not too much. Not too many sofas. You don't need that many sofas in your house. Or, I mean, sometimes if you have like a huge empty space, don't be afraid to just cut it off. Like, just make that area non-existent. You can block it up and nobody will even know. Nobody will know, and you'll have just a nice corner in your house. Now these next tips this is like useful information and stuff regarding the transform tool, because that's kind of new and a lot of people are still kind of working with it. So, placing objects on objects. So when you place a basic shape on, when you place two basic shapes on top of each other. So when you place them on top of each other like this, it essentially becomes one, so you move it together like this as long as you grab the one object that it's on top of. So when you use the transform tool, obviously, you can transform the whole shape instead of just the one. They'll move together, and that's what makes the transform tool really useful. So if you transform the shape on top, it'll only transform that one because it's not, it's its own shape up here. You have to move the one down there for it to, similar to when you move like a basic shape that has the shape on top of it. Obviously the transform tool works the same way, which is really cool, I think. Makes it easier to duplicate it because the transform tool on top is going to stay the same. Especially when you're doing like complicated things, it makes it a lot easier to duplicate them. Like when I built the Ferris wheel in my Christmas build, it was really easy to duplicate things rather than trying to make it all symmetrical. So if you transform the shape on top, it is still anchored to the one you placed it on, so you can then transform all of it and it all moves together. You can transform this one on its own and then transform it all and it stays. It's very intuitive the way the transform tool works. That's why I think it's really cool, and a lot of people have asked me if I think it's worth buying, and I really think it is. It's a very strong tool in terms of building, and like the possibilities are truly endless with what you can do with the transform tool. So yeah, I do think it's worth it. And you can stack things, like the mushrooms I did in my fairy core build. You can stack them, well, not like this, but you can stack things. Let me reset this. As long as it's not super transformed and you're putting it on a side that it can be stacked on. This is not a good example. I didn't put effort into it, and I'm not good at making things with shapes, but yes, this is a rough example. And of course you can transform it however you want, like that. Let me go ahead and show you my, remember there are height limitations when transforming things up or down, which obviously can be avoided by just moving the shape up a floor. Let me open up a build that I just did recently, which is a good example of the transform tool because I used a lot of basic shapes for it. It was super expensive, so I should be able to find it. Here it is. This is my recent build. It's raft, but it's in Bloxburg, and the whole base of it is made with basic shapes. So, you see, if I tried to copy it, for one, I can copy the whole net just like this because of how I built it, like that. So this entire cube, these are all basic shapes. It's a 2x2 basic shape, but I can move it all at once because of how I built it. So what I did is like this. You stack them all on top of each other so they're anchored to this one cube, and then you transform and move it where you want it to be. But I do think that this tool is very useful and very intuitive with the way that it works, because even if I moved these items, they are anchored. So that is how I made that. You can move all 4 of these just by doing that. You don't need a whole platform underneath or anything. You can just do that. So if I copy this, I have a whole chunk of the raft in one piece because I put them all on top of each other and duplicated them. I did this and I just moved them so I could place them all in the same place instead of individually, which is really complicated. It's a really complicated way of doing it, but that is an example of how advanced you can make things with the transform tool, and it's just really fun to mess with. So last thing I'll touch on is the controls for the transform tool, which I think are pretty straightforward. But anyway, you press T, click on it, and you have all these controls. You can go up, down, side to side, back and forth. You can turn it this way, this way, this way. Pretty self-explanatory, you know. And now you have a UFO. Wow. And you can still resizable objects that are transformed, by the way, unless, you know, like regular objects, if there's something on top of them, you can't resize them. But yeah, gamers, those are my tips for building in Bloxburg, and there's a lot of cars driving by right now for building in Bloxburg. If you have questions, or if there's any other things you want to know about building, let me know, because I definitely want to make another video like this that's more planned out. This one was kind of just made out of some of the questions I had written down from like other times. So if you have other questions, put them in the comments and I'll try to answer them in another one. Thanks for watching, gamers, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.